The night was heavy with silence, the kind that presses against the chest and makes every breath feel like a struggle. A faint breeze slipped through the broken window pane, stirring the thin curtains, but even the wind seemed hesitant to enter a house so full of sorrow. The woman sat on the edge of the bed, her hand resting protectively over her rounded belly. Her eyes were red, not from sleep but from hours of quiet crying. She had been living like this for months now, counting the days by bruises instead of calendars, praying that one morning she would wake and find her husband's rage gone, his heart softened. But prayers had become whispers lost to a cruel fate. Tonight, something in her heart told her that darkness would not be kind. She heard it then, the uneven sound of footsteps crunching gravel outside. Her stomach tightened. The door creaked open, and he stood there, his shadow long and looming, the smell of alcohol clinging to him like a curse. His shirt was half-buttoned, his hair disheveled, and on his collar was a faint trace of lipstick that wasn't hers. Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to ask where he had been, but she knew better. Questions invited anger. Silence was her only defense. But silence didn't save her tonight. Who was it? He slurred, his voice sharp and ugly. Who were you talking to this afternoon? She blinked in confusion. No one, she whispered, her voice fragile. I was at home, doing laundry. You can ask. Liar. His roar filled the room like thunder. He stepped forward, eyes wild, face twisted with jealousy and guilt he could not admit. Do you think I don't know? You think you can fool me? Tears stung her eyes. She stood, hands raised slightly in a plea. Please, I haven't done anything. I swear on our child, I've been faithful. I only. But before she could finish, he shoved her hard against the wall. The shock of it sent a bolt of pain through her back. She gasped, clutching her belly instinctively. Her heart raced, every instinct screaming to protect the life inside her. He wasn't listening. He never did. He stalked across the room, grabbing the wooden stick he had left leaning against the chair days ago. No more lies, he muttered, gripping the stick with trembling hands, his anger searching for something to destroy. If you won't tell the truth, I'll make you. She backed away, shaking her head, her voice breaking. Please, stop. You'll hurt the baby. But reason was lost in the storm of his rage. The first strike came fast, landing across her shoulder. She cried out, collapsing to her knees. The second blow hit her arm as she tried to shield herself. Pain radiated through her body, sharp and unrelenting. Each hit stole her breath, each cry growing weaker than the last. She begged him to stop, her voice trembling with terror and exhaustion. Please, I'm begging you, please don't. But he was beyond hearing, trapped in a world where love had rotted into cruelty. He swung again, the sound of wood cracking against skin echoing through the room. She tried to crawl away, her hand never leaving her stomach, but her strength was fading. Tears blurred her vision, dripping onto the cold floor. Finally, the stick slipped from his hand. He stood panting, chest heaving, eyes glassy and distant. For a brief moment, something like regret flickered across his face, but it was gone as quickly as it came. Without a word, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The woman lay on the floor, trembling, her breath shallow. Every inch of her body throbbed with pain, but her thoughts were only of the child. She pressed her palm to her belly, whispering softly, "It's okay, little one. I'm here, I'm here." Her voice cracked, and a sob escaped her lips. The house was silent again, but it was not peace, only the quiet that follows destruction. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping gently against the roof, as if the heavens themselves mourned for her. She closed her eyes, letting the tears flow freely, praying that her baby's tiny heartbeat still echoed within her, praying that someday, somehow, someone would save them both from this living nightmare. Morning came slowly, with weak sunlight spilling through the cracked window, illuminating the small room where pain still lingered in the air. The woman stirred, her body aching from every movement. Her face was pale, her lips dry, and each breath came with effort. She had managed to crawl onto the bed during the night, wrapping herself in a thin blanket that did little to comfort her. Her thoughts were scattered, flashes of the beating, the anger in his eyes, the fear that her baby might have been hurt. She placed a trembling hand over her stomach and whispered a prayer. The faintest flutter beneath her palm gave her strength to breathe again. But fear still gnawed at her heart. How much longer could she live like this? As she tried to rise, there came a knock at the door, firm, deliberate. Her pulse quickened. For a moment, Terror gripped her. Had he returned? She froze, unsure whether to answer. Then she heard a familiar voice, deep and steady, calling her name. Relief washed over her as tears filled her eyes. It was her eldest brother. She stumbled toward the door, fumbling with the lock, and when it finally opened, she collapsed into his arms. The sight that met her brother's eyes broke them in silence. Their little sister, the one they had promised to protect since childhood, stood before them bruised, trembling, and frail. Her once bright eyes were dull with pain, her arms covered in dark marks, her dress torn at the shoulder. The eldest brother caught her before she could fall, his voice trembling. "Who did this?" he asked, though deep down he already knew. The middle brother stepped forward, jaw clenched, his face pale with shock and fury. The youngest, always the most gentle, touched her forehead softly, fighting back tears. They led her to the couch, helping her sit carefully. She tried to hide her arms, to cover her bruises, but the eldest took her hands and said quietly, "Don't. We need to see." She lowered her gaze, ashamed, though she had nothing to be ashamed of. For a while, there was only silence, the kind heavy with unspoken emotions. Finally, the youngest brother spoke, voice breaking. "Tell us, please." Her lips trembled as she began to speak. She told them everything, the arguments, the jealousy, the drinking, the mistress he flaunted without remorse. She spoke of how the man she married had changed, how love had turned to cruelty, how last night he had come home furious and accused her of things she never did. And then she described the beating, her words faltering as tears rolled down her cheeks. When she spoke of the stick, of how she tried to shield her baby, her brothers could no longer hold back their anger. The middle brother punched the wall, the sound echoing through the small room. "He hit you while you're carrying his child," he shouted, voice trembling with rage. "He deserves to lose everything." The eldest placed a hand on his shoulder, his expression cold but controlled. "He will. But not with anger. We'll do this right." His gaze shifted back to his sister. "You're coming with us. You're not staying here another moment." She shook her head weakly, whispering, "Please, don't make it worse. I don't want revenge, I just want peace. I want my baby safe." He knelt before her, taking her hands gently. "Peace doesn't come from silence. He's taken enough from you. It ends now." She looked into his eyes, saw the promise there, steady, unyielding. For the first time in months, she felt safe enough to nod. The brothers helped her gather a few belongings, documents, clothes, the small locket their late mother had given her. They led her outside, the youngest supporting her carefully down the steps. The morning sun felt strange on her skin, almost too bright after so much darkness. As they drove to the hospital, she sat quietly in the back seat, staring out the window, her hands resting protectively over her belly. Her brothers spoke little, their silence filled with thoughts of vengeance and justice. When they arrived, doctors rushed to examine her, their concern growing as they saw the bruises. The brothers waited outside, pacing the corridor, their anger simmering just beneath the surface. Finally, a nurse emerged with a soft smile. "She and the baby are stable," she said gently. "But she needs rest, care, and protection." The eldest brother nodded, his jaw set. "She'll have all three." He turned to his brothers, his voice low but firm. He raised his hand against our blood. "He won't get away with it." They exchanged a silent vow. What had begun as sorrow would now become justice. Their sister's tears would no longer fall unnoticed, and the man who had broken her spirit would soon learn what it meant to face the wrath of three brothers bound by love, honor, and the promise they made long ago, to protect her at any cost. The brothers gathered that evening in the study of the eldest, a room lined with shelves of law books, family photographs, and quiet authority. The soft hum of the city beyond the tall windows did little to soothe their fury. Each of them had seen pain in their careers, faced betrayal in business, but nothing compared to seeing their sister broken and bruised, a woman carrying life inside her treated with such cruelty. The air was thick with unspoken rage, the kind that demanded action. They had promised her no bloodshed, no rash retaliation, but vengeance did not have to come with fists, it could come with precision, power, and truth. The eldest brother, methodical and calm, leaned forward over his desk, spreading out a folder filled with documents. "We start with evidence," he said. "If we want justice, it must be undeniable. He won't escape through lies." The middle brother nodded, already scrolling through his tablet. "I've got one of our investigators tracing his accounts. He's been withdrawing large sums, too large for daily use. I bet he's funneling money to the mistress. The youngest, usually gentle, clenched his jaw. He beats our sister and buys gifts for another woman. We'll strip him of everything he treasures. Within hours, their network of contacts was activated. Private investigators trailed the husband's movements, capturing photos of him entering hotels with the mistress, laughing over dinner, boasting about his wealth. Bank records revealed hidden accounts, secret transfers, and expensive jewelry purchased under a false name. The brothers uncovered messages filled with arrogance, him mocking his wife's loyalty, promising the mistress that soon he'd be free, that the burden of his family would be gone. Each revelation struck them deeper, but it also sharpened their resolve. They would not simply destroy him, they would expose him. In another corner of the city, cameras hidden near the woman's home recorded his late-night visits, the shouting, the slamming doors. A neighbor, who had once turned away in fear, came forward now, telling the investigators she'd heard screams too many nights to count. Another witness, a delivery man, recalled seeing bruises on the woman's arms weeks before. Slowly, the brothers built a timeline of his cruelty, a record of pain-stretching months. The eldest compiled every photo, every statement, every transaction. "We'll give this to the authorities," he said. "But we'll also show the world what he really is." The middle brother, whose voice carried authority in every boardroom, reached out to the press discreetly. "When the time comes," he told a trusted journalist, "you'll have a story the city won't forget. But not before we're ready." Meanwhile, the youngest brother, restless and furious, visited the hospital every evening, staying by their sister's side. He never spoke of what they were doing. He only held her hand and assured her everything would be all right. She would ask quietly, "You're not doing anything dangerous, are you?" And he would smile, hiding the storm behind his eyes. "No, little one. We're just making sure you'll never be hurt again." As days turned to nights, their strategy unfolded like a chess match. They contacted lawyers, secured restraining orders, froze accounts that had been funded with their family's investments. Every favor the husband had begged from them in past business ventures was revoked. His empire, built on greed and deceit, began to crumble, quietly at first, then rapidly. Calls went unanswered, partners withdrew, and clients backed out. He was too blind to see the hands pulling the strings behind his downfall. He believed his fortune eternal, his charm unbreakable. He had no idea the very men he mocked were sealing his fate. Late one evening, the brothers gathered again, the evidence stacked high before them. The eldest spoke softly but firmly. "We have everything, proof of abuse, financial fraud, adultery. When we move, there will be no escape." The middle brother smirked, a rare, grim smile. He wanted power. Let him face real power. The youngest nodded, eyes dark with quiet fury. "He made our sister bleed. Now he'll bleed reputation, wealth, and freedom." They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in thought. Outside, the city lights glimmered like watchful eyes. The eldest finally said, "We do this not out of hate, but out of love, for her, for that child. Justice is our revenge." And with that, the plan was sealed. They would strike not with violence, but with truth sharper than any blade, ensuring that the man who had caused so much pain would lose not just his pride, but everything he once believed made him powerful. The night of the charity gala arrived with all the glitter and elegance the city's elite expected. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers, the air rich with laughter, music, and the scent of expensive perfume. Guests mingled in silk gowns and tailored suits, unaware that beneath the polished surface of the evening lay a storm waiting to break. The event, hosted by one of the brothers' corporations, was advertised as a fundraiser for women's shelters, a fitting stage for what was to come. Everything had been planned with precision, every detail designed to look like any other glamorous night. But for the three brothers, this wasn't just another event. It was Judgment Day. The husband arrived fashionably late, strutting through the golden entrance with his mistress on his arm. She wore a sparkling gown, her lips curved into a proud smile, believing she had won. Believing the man beside her had conquered his past, his wife, and the guilt he tried to drown in lies. Cameras flashed as they posed together, reporters calling out their names. He smiled confidently, oblivious to the silent eyes watching from across the room. The brothers stood near the stage, composed and courteous, greeting other guests as if tonight were merely a celebration. Only the faint tightness in their smiles betrayed the fury held deep within. When the last toast was made and the guests settled at their tables, the music softened, and the lights dimmed. The eldest brother took the microphone, his voice smooth, calm, commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "tonight we gather not only to support a cause close to our hearts but to remember why it matters, why truth and compassion must always triumph over cruelty." His words echoed through the room, drawing quiet attention. "There are those among us," he continued, his eyes sweeping across the guests, "who hide behind wealth and charm, who smile in public yet bring pain behind closed doors. Tonight, we will show what that looks like, so none of us ever turn away again." The murmurs began as a massive screen behind the stage flickered to life. At first, the image was dark, grainy, then clear enough to still every whisper. There he was, the husband, their guest of honor, standing in his living room, shouting at his pregnant wife. The room fell silent. His voice, loud and venomous, filled the air as he accused her of betrayal. Then came the sound of the stick striking flesh, the woman's cry, the echo of violence that could not be denied. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some guests turned away, hands covering their mouths, others stared in disbelief. The mistress froze, color draining from her face. The husband jumped to his feet, shouting, "Turn it off. This is a lie." But the brothers remained silent. The footage continued, photos of his mistress, records of stolen money, bank transfers, secret gifts. Another clip showed him laughing, mocking the wife he'd hurt. His own voice sealed his fate. "She's nothing," he sneered in the recording. "I'll be rid of her soon." The eldest brother stepped forward again, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This," he said coldly, "is the man who pretended to be respectable. A husband who beat his pregnant wife. A coward who hides behind power. Tonight, the truth stands before you." Reporters rushed forward, cameras flashing, microphones thrust toward the disgraced man. The mistress tried to flee, but security blocked her path, the door locked as part of the plan. The husband's protests turned desperate, his face twisted in panic. "You can't do this. I'll sue." The middle brother's voice rang out from the front row. "Sue us with what? Your lies. Your stolen money." The crowd began to murmur again, the tide of sympathy turned to disgust. Friends turned their backs, investors whispered of withdrawal, reporters snapped pictures that would fill every headline by morning. Realization crashed over him, his empire, his reputation, everything he'd built on deceit was collapsing in real time. He stood alone in the glare of 1,000 eyes, stripped of every mask. The brothers didn't smile. There was no triumph in their expressions, only grim justice. They hadn't done this for applause. They'd done it for the woman who had suffered in silence, and for the child who would now be born into light, not darkness. As security escorted him out, his mistress trailing behind in shame, the eldest brother turned to the audience. "Let tonight be a reminder," he said softly. "Evil hides in plain sight. It's our duty to see it, and to stop it." The guests rose in solemn applause, the echoes of justice filling the room. Somewhere beyond the city lights, a woman finally slept without fear. Days passed after the gala, but the shock it left behind rippled through the city like a storm that refused to settle. News outlets ran the story on every channel. CEO brothers expose abusive husband in public scandal. Videos from the event went viral. Millions watched the footage of his cruelty, the crowd's gasps, and his downfall in real time. Within 48 hours, police arrived at his residence with arrest warrants. He tried to protest, but his lawyers had abandoned him, his assets frozen, and every connection he once bragged about severed. As handcuffs closed around his wrists, the man who once strutted with arrogance finally hung his head. The mistress, too, vanished into silence, her name tainted, her social circles rejecting her as quickly as they once welcomed her. Justice had begun its course, slow and relentless. Meanwhile, far from the chaos, the brothers focused on what mattered most, their sister's healing. They had moved her into a quiet villa surrounded by gardens and soft sunlight, a place untouched by the memories of violence. Each room was bright, filled with flowers and fresh air, a sharp contrast to the darkness she had endured. For the first few days, she barely spoke, spending her hours staring out the window, one hand always resting on her belly. The physical pain had faded, but the wounds left on her spirit lingered like shadows. The eldest brother visited every morning, bringing breakfast and gentle words. The middle brother handled her legal matters, ensuring she would never have to face her abuser again. The youngest stayed by her side most evenings, reading to her softly, sometimes sitting in silence, offering comfort without words. As time passed, color slowly returned to her face. She began walking in the garden, her steps hesitant at first, then steady. The scent of jasmine and the soft hum of bees seemed to breathe life back into her. One morning, as she sat on a wooden bench, eyes closed, she felt a tiny flutter in her belly, a gentle movement, like the beating of wings. Her eyes snapped open, and tears filled them instantly. She pressed her palm against her stomach, whispering, "You're here, you're okay." The sound of footsteps drew her gaze upward, and she saw her brothers approaching. "What happened?" the youngest asked, his tone anxious. She smiled, a small, trembling smile that carried more hope than words ever could. "He kicked," she whispered. "The baby's moving." For a moment, none of them spoke. The eldest brother knelt beside her, placing a hand gently over hers. "That's his way of telling you," he said softly, "that he's strong. Just like his mother." Her tears fell freely now, but they were tears of relief, not fear. The middle brother took a deep breath, looking toward the sky. "After everything you've been through," he said quietly, "seeing you smile again, it's all we ever wanted." In the following weeks, she began to heal, not just physically, but emotionally. The nightmares grew less frequent, replaced by dreams of sunlight and laughter. She started reading again, painting, humming softly as she moved through her new home. Each day, her brothers found a new way to remind her she was not alone. A letter on the breakfast table, a vase of fresh flowers, a hand resting on her shoulder when memories threatened to resurface. Slowly, she began to believe that life could be gentle again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with gold and crimson, she stood on the balcony, watching the light fade. The eldest brother joined her, silent for a while before saying, "He's been sentenced. 5 years for assault and fraud. It won't undo what he's done, but it means he can't hurt anyone else." She nodded, her expression calm. "I don't need revenge," she whispered. "I just needed it to end." He turned to her, eyes soft. "It has. And now, you begin again." She placed her hand over her heart, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. "This child," she said quietly, "will know love, not fear. That's my promise." The brothers exchanged a look of pride and quiet gratitude. Together, they had turned her pain into purpose, her suffering into strength. The past would always leave scars, but they were no longer symbols of shame, they were proof of survival. As the first stars appeared above, the woman who had once wept in darkness now stood bathed in light, her future open, her spirit unbroken, and her family standing firmly by her side.